So fill up your coffees as we're getting ready for the next exciting presentation. And we're going to talk about why European cooperation is necessary for establishing the real European AI ecosystem. And this topic is going to be presented for us by Daniel Abbou. Daniel is the managing director of German AI Association, responsible for political and press communications, as well as support for funding projects. He previously founded AI Hub Europe and advised various politicians and companies. Daniel was a press spokesman in various ministries, including the former Senator of Finance and current State Secretary in the Federal Ministry of Economics in Germany. His enthusiasm for digitalization and innovation has taken him on a TV and radio as a journalist for new technologies. So welcome, Daniel.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really nice being here.
Great, a pleasure to have you here. And as a voice for European AI community, I have a tough question for you.
All right.
So how would you describe the year 2021 for this industry? Was it full of new innovative surprises? Did you have to work very hard to get something new, or maybe you have some other thoughts?
Well, I can tell you just from my perspective as the managing director of the German AI Association, we nearly doubled our membership from 2020 to 2021. So in this case, it was a pretty good year, and we are really looking forward because we are now around 400 members in the German AI Association, and we're pretty sure we can tap the 500 in the next year. So it was, besides pandemic, booster shots, and all this Corona, from the perspective of the AI ecosystem in Germany, it was quite a good year.
So I really hope you keep up with the trend of growing your community that rapidly. And now I'm ready to give the floor for you for your presentation.
Thank you so much, and thank you to all listeners and people who invited me here to the AI Boost. And as the managing director of the German AI Association, it is not my only role. The other role, and especially for the topic of European sovereignty, of European ecosystem in AI, I want to present to you also the European AI Forum. And what is the European AI Forum? Well, it was established 2020 and with the vision to connect the European AI community on multiple levels. So we organized some congresses biannual in Zagreb, in Berlin, and in Brussels. And please let me give this moment of advertising. On the 17th of December, we will be in Ljubljana in Slovenia, because our Slovenian friends have at the moment the EU presidency, and we like to go always to the member state who has the presidency. So in this case, we are really looking forward. And as you can see in the short graph on the side, our member states, we started with Croatia, France, and Germany, and we got Bulgaria, Poland, Netherlands, Poland there, and we are very, very also thankful that our Austrian friends are there. But as our newest member, we are very proud that the Artificial Intelligence Association of Lithuania joined as the 9th member, if I'm right, the European AI Forum. And we are so thankful, especially Linas, my friend, I hope you're seeing that. We are so happy that you joined our little European family. And it is important that we work together. The first three forums, for example, on the European AI side, had Verstager, Šefčovič, Cedric O, Dorothée Baer, so the higher ups in the national ministries and in the European Commission. But what we want, and there is no lack of virtual congresses, as you all know, but what we try to do is to connect the AI community also with stakeholders in politics, because it is so important that we learn from each other, that the stakeholders in politics and in the Commission and on national governments learn about the reality about founding an AI company in Europe. But what we also do, so there's a little joke outside, and it's called, when a Frenchman and a German are having dinner, it's already called a European initiative. And we didn't want to do the same mistake. So what I'm really proud of, that we have a very strong Eastern European voice in the European AI Forum. So it's not only Germany and France and Italy and Netherlands, but we have with Bulgaria, with Slovenia, with Croatia, and we have strong European voices, and we are very proud and we are very happy that Lithuania joined there, especially from the view from the Baltic states is also important, because the world also in AI, the view from Berlin is a complete different view than the world from Zagreb or certainly from Vilnius. So we are very proud of having this cooperation in Europe already going. We are 100% independent. We are mostly an entrepreneurial driven association. And this is very important, because I would say that academia is already, for decades, they are very well connected, but founders from Croatia, founders from the Netherlands, founders from Bulgaria are not connected at the moment. And what we are trying to do with the European AI Forum is not only the stakeholder connection, but to bring the European AI ecosystem together. So the existing infrastructure and the recognition, like I said, on the EU and other stakeholders, but the growing number of international supporters and participants makes it so much fun working at the European and for the European AI Forum. And through our national associations, we have well-established connections to big data and robotic stakeholders, and the collaborative approach involving stakeholders from industry, academia, politics, and society, because only when we all work together, we really can establish a European ecosystem itself. So why is European cooperation so important? Well, I think as a very, how can I say, driven European person. My father is a Frenchman, my mother is German, so I live Europe all my life. But why is it so important for European cooperation? Well, I would say there's one thing, as you surely most of you know, that the European Commission did the recommendation for regulating the European AI on a European scale. The first draft was in April 2021, yes, and then we had to do a reaction. And what I'm really proud of, that this time 6 European countries came together, 6 European national AI associations, and worked together and made joint recommendations for the European Union. And not, how can I say, on an ideological scale, but we took use cases. We are discussing with experts from our communities what is good in the proposal and what is bad, and you can read it up at our website, europeanaiforum.com. And it was a very interesting process. Also, what I told you before, that some views from other countries differ from the views you have in Germany or in Lithuania. And so it was a very interesting and very gratifying experience that we had there. And we are very happy about it. But let me take you to the cooperation, and let me put it in a very concrete way. Let's take one project of telling why European cooperation, why bringing the European AI ecosystem is so important. So there is the large AI models. I'm sure most of you heard of it. So large AI models make it easy to generate abundance of output, so sets enabling them to recognize patterns, of course, and they are trained on large data sets containing billions and billions and billions of words, and learn experience without the need of human input. So they can predict, for example, the next word in a sentence, write convincing essays, charts, whatever you can say. And I think you all know about OpenAI's GPT-3, which is really impressive what they've done there. But of course, that large-scale AI models have the potential to transform the AI market. So Of course, I get it. There's always a big transformation. There is always, how can I say, the next buzzword there and stuff like that. But we talked with many, many experts from academia, from economy, and we are really convinced that, for example, large AI models have the potential to really transform the AI market. Take for example, OpenAI DALL-E. Yeah, well, these are fun examples, but let me say, you put in avocado and chair, and like you see in the second row, you get directly an avocado chair or a straw front, which has, for example, AI boost, and then you get all the fantastic pictures there, which you can see now. But it is not about avocado chairs and storefronts in any way. It is quite more. And it continues with the connecting of text and images, which is also very, very possible with large AI models, and bringing together, not only in identifying, but to bring this media, text, images, video together, and generating complete new outcomes with them is a very, very interesting thing. Or take Google Lambda, which reached a breakthrough in conversational technology. It is so impressive what was done there. But also on the other hand, and Google is just telling me something, and also the Chinese models which are there are very impressive to see. So this is a technology which is a little bit in the future, but not too far away. And large AI models will outperform and gradually replace current actual AI solutions. By the way, if you take also quantum computing in it, then we are on a whole new level of that. But as you know, USA and China are leading this competition, and Europe is left behind again. And there is a digital discrepancy, not on the academia side. I think in academia, universities, papers, I think this is quite impressive what we are doing in Europe, and the research itself is very good. Take on language models, what, for example, the German DFKI is doing, but many, many others all around the continent. But when it comes to put the knowledge into real AI products, we lag behind. We lag behind the investment, we lag behind in the developing of and scaling of products. And it is so important that we lost already everything what search engines, social networks, stuff like that is already in US and Chinese hands. And we have to see that large AI models is not only a thing for personal use, it has major implications on the economy side, on the industry side, on the large data sets which exist today in European companies and are not actually used at the moment. But do we want to give really, after we gave our personal data already to the Googles and the Amazons and the Microsofts, do we really want, as a European continent, give also our industrial data directly to world competitors like the USA or to China? And I think we in Europe don't have to repeat the same mistakes we already did like 10 to 15 or to 20 years ago. So the point also is when using American or Chinese products, and I think this is quite common sense by now, is the dependency on American and Chinese solution, of course, but no protection of privacy. Okay, that's a little harsh, but I would say less protection of privacy and the insufficient support of European languages. In many cases, only the main European languages are used, and the lack of transparency. What is happening with your data? So in this case, that we aim, and there you see at the upper right corner, you see liam.ai, or the liam in speaking in English stands for Large European AI Models. And if you want to have further information, go to liam or the liam.ai, and you will get, I hope, a good recollection what this project in a deeper dive is. But we aim to build on a European level large AI models that enable Europe to take on a leading position in AI development. And we have to take a leading position on that, because if we get far more behind our competitors worldwide, there will be digital dependencies which already exist. And when you're dependent on someone, these societies, these economies, they can do harm to European economic outreach and prosperity. And we have to learn, and we have to compete with the big players on that. So our idea is, with a large European AI models, is that it is open source, that it has high data protection, that universal languages throughout Europe, Lithuanian, Slovenian, Bulgarian, French, Dutch, Icelandic, Faroe, whatever, that all European languages are represented there. And it's so important, I think, that we embrace our different languages as a chance of enhancing AI throughout Europe. And transparent algorithm and the reduction of bias, I think that is one of the main issues also when you talk with political stakeholders, is that the fear of bias, which is sometimes existent, sometimes I think it's a little overplayed, but there are use cases where bias is definitely there, but where we can do an active role of transparent algorithm with the reduction of biases. And that CO2 neutral in this case, that we aim that our, how can I say, our data centers are working on a very environmental friendly note, because you all know how many energy is taken into these data centers, and we have to do something that is not with coal as energy or other fossil fuels. So this would be a very important part, that this large European AI models have these open source, high data protection, universal languages, the reduction of biases, transparent algorithms, and it is, at least we aim to be environmental friendly. And this universal languages, universal model gives access to a massive market. I mean, Europe is such a big market throughout. Why are the US and China-based companies investing so much in Europe? Because it's a big market. Because there are consumers there. And why are we giving away as a European such a large stake of this market to non-European players? This has to end. We in Europe have to get a larger portion of this market, especially on the digital front. But we have to work for that. So over 300 applications are now using the classic GPT-3 from OpenAI. And on the scale, that 1.3% of the GDP in Germany is through AI, and the market value of AI is estimated at 1.9 billion for only German companies. So there is a chance there. There's a chance throughout Europe. It's not only about Germany, it's about all the other European countries. So the next step to build a large European AI model is, of course, the creation of data sets, the development of algorithms, the provision of computing capacity, the integration and involvement of the AI ecosystem, and the validation of European values. It is so important that, of course, what we need is good data sets. I think we all know that sometimes, especially from European companies, getting good data sets isn't the most easiest thing that happens. The development of algorithm, we have the talents for that. We have the people for that. The provision of computing capacity, this is one thing. When you take the HPCs, of course, the HPCs are I can, in Germany, mostly use for research purposes, which is good. And I'm not criticizing that in any way or form, but I think we need high capacity data centers with the focus on developing AI products, with developing large AI data sets, which are used for commercial use. For commercial use in Europe, in data centers, computed in Europe also. And this is a thing because, of course, it's a large investment. An AI data center is not paid with 1 or 2 millions, you know, that the investment go into the hundreds of millions of euros. And there is also a thing where stakeholders from politics, but also from classical industry have to come together and think about the investment strategy of the future. And I think, and many of us think, that very high AI data centers would be a good investment in the future, and especially for the European future. The integration and involvement of the AI ecosystem is what I meant in this case for European companies. But let me say also one thing about European companies. I'm not only talking about the big ones. I'm not talking about Renault, Peugeot on the Volkswagen or Mercedes on the automotive side in Europe. I'm talking about startups and scale-ups. That startups and scale-ups have a chance to get into these data centers, that they can have computing time without financially ruining themselves. It is so important that startups and scale-up have the possibility of getting into the data center and get time in the data centers. It is so important that we give, how can I say, a kind of development chance for startups. And this will cost money. Yes, it will. But we have to invest in the future also of our future companies. And I think this is something that sometimes, which lacks in European politics or in European thinking, is that sometimes you have to invest in the future of getting a result. And it's not happening. The return on investment perhaps will not happen in 1 year or 2 years. Perhaps we have to get a little bit further. But I wish that especially on the sides of national governments, there is a more mindset that we have to invest in our AI startups. Also, by the way, just to take a little detour there, the state as the first customer is also a very important point of how governments can help startups and scale-ups for that. Why not going to a startup and looking for small solution for administrative problems with data, with the validation of data and other ideas? Why isn't the government perhaps one of the first clients of small startups? It doesn't happen in Germany too much. I'm guessing, as what I'm hearing from other European states, also not happening too much. Perhaps this would be an idea where we can go together. And the validation of European values, the fifth point, of course, you know, that I think it is really a chance for us with enhanced privacy, with enhanced data security, with the reduction of bias, with, I would say, our core European values, that we have a chance on the market, and not only on the European market, but also on the global market there. So we are already building the first pilot of Liam. Please, as I said, liam.ai. And I'm so happy that we are working all together in Europe, not only for the large European AI models, but also for so many other things. Like I said to you, the regulation on the European side and on the Commission side, which is now going to Parliament, and which will be a very interesting thing. And I'm so happy that we have our 8 together, and now that Lithuania is there, there will be, I hope, a very good exchange between us all, and we already have done quite a lot in 2 years. And this will be interesting for the next one. For example, when you take the regulation, now it's going from the European Commission to the European Parliament. And there will be very, very interesting discussions, which you have quite a lot of politicians which really grasp the importance of this regulation. And there are also some who sometimes, I think, if I may say, and just quitting the presentation now, that sometimes in Europe, the regulation, it's not for some people, it's not the regulation of AI. Sometimes it's the regulation of their fear of AI, which is sometimes in discussions which I really recognize. But we have to do so much. We have to convince, we have to say, not only to politicians, by the way, also to the classic industry, yeah, that AI is not some kind of Hollywood movie, that AI is not only facial recognition, that it can help transform the European industry toward a better future and toward a future where we can hold our position in the global market. And I would say this is one of the most important things why we should work together for Europe, for our national states. And for that, I would close now my remarks. And thank you so much for listening to me. Thank you so much for at AI Boost for inviting me. And I'm really happy that we all came together today and that you gave me the chance to speak 24 minutes to you now directly. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Daniel, for your presentation. And I'm super happy to see Lithuania's name as a part of the European family right now. And as you mentioned during your presentation, the regulations are usually based on some fears, on some uncertainties. So what are the most common fears still in the market? Some time ago, that used to be that all the robots and AI will take our jobs, but are there any different?
Well, fear is always a thing that I think when you see, for example, 20 years ago or 30 years ago, when automation took place, for example, in the German auto plants, there were a fear that the robots will take over and stuff like that. And today, more people work in the automobile industry with robots, yeah, than ever before. And fear is also kind of what I mentioned, the Terminator 2 fear, yeah, or the fear of other Hollywood movies. It is very interesting discussing AI with some political stakeholders, and you realize after 5 minutes which Hollywood film they've seen last about AI. So this is quite interesting, but I would say that the fear, of course, is there. But what we have to do is not only convincing them, but showing them what is possible. Showing them with concrete use cases what the state of European AI is at the moment. There is a lack of communication between the stakeholders, and I think we should bridge that.
Well, I hope that Robert Sophia is not going to take my job anytime soon.
No, I wouldn't guess at all. No.
And as well, you mentioned that having a focus is really important in catching up or at least getting closer to the US and China. But do you think that's enough? Do we have enough of resources, talents, as well? It's a long shot, right? Long-term investments. So what else needs to be done in terms of like cooperation, universities cooperation with businesses and some other areas as well?
Oh, this is a topic for another 30 minutes, which I won't take. No, don't worry. It is so much. Investment is one thing. Yeah, there is sometimes a lack of investment in European companies. It is getting better. No doubt about it. It is getting better. But when you see the investments on the other side of the Atlantic or in Asia, we are still quite far behind. The second thing, talent, yeah. And I don't know, sadly, how life or the school system is in Lithuania, but I can tell you that my daughter, which has now reached, she's now nearly 12, her digital education in the German school system is not very convincing. It is still that, I'm not talking about that every school child has to learn Python or C++ or anything like that, but digital education, and not only on a higher level, on a universitarian level or on the A level, on every school level, digital education, what is an algorithm, how does data sets work, not programming it. We don't need 1,000 full stack developers every day. But what we need is a society who understands the importance of digital things. And from there, we can work up and we can generate more talent about that.
In Lithuania, we even have a project where it teaches all 5th grade students how to do basic programming. So it's interesting to see how this project evolves and what kind of generation is going to be out of those 5th graders right now. And as well,
I will visit with my daughter Lithuanian school if that's okay. So if this project is successful, we will have a look at it.
Great. And as well, you represent a business community, startup community, and you mentioned that it could be our lifesaver in terms of bringing some world innovations out there. So what are the main struggles that startups are facing right now to reach those targets?
Oh, well, I would say it is talent. It is financing in some way, but it is also, how can I say, the support of other factors. In what I said before, for example, the state as a first client. Yeah, why doesn't the state act as a market and looks around in the startup community and said, well, this would be an interesting idea, or this would be an interesting idea, or for example, by fraud detection, why not trying to use, at least in some kind of sandbox, not the big IT concern solution, but to use a startup, for example. And I would say, but it's not only a governmental thing. It is also a thing that the exchange between classical industry, and new digital industry is quite difficult because there is a cultural gap between those two. So, for example, that a classical industry who did the last 40 years in digital silos, and were afraid that their blueprints are gone or stolen to an Asian country. Now they have to do data sharing, and this mindset from data silo to data sharing is quite wide, and there has to be a communication also in the cultural way between classical industry and digital industry of bridging this cultural gap, and this would be also very, very important in my view.
Well, I believe we already see a great example of such cooperation with banks trying to deal with fintechs, understanding, learning to creating together. So, Daniel, thank you very much for joining us today, for sharing your presentation.
Thank you so much.
That was really great time discussing with you. And next, we will move not only how to develop AI, but also how to create it responsibly.